So for a long time. We also host about 20 to 30 of these events here and in Europe, extending that journalism to try to better drill into and understand the ways in which the digital disruption has been impacting a variety of areas in media and marketing. We have, and our whole focus has always been, our tradition has been grounded in media planning and buying, and the ways in which these new channels, these two new technologies are changing how media is bought, how brand strategy is constructed, but also how consumers are interacting with messaging. And that really, it's a simple concept, but it really goes to the heart of the changes that we see and we talk about in all of these events and in all of our journalism. We started out, for instance, by focusing on the channels, the technologies that were driving a lot of this. So we focused a lot on social, on video, on mobile, on programmatic advertising. But in recent years, it's become more apparent, and as these technologies have become more commonplace, it's clear that the disruption is taking different forms in different verticals. So we've been focusing more on those verticals, on different business sectors. So we have events now that talk about, for instance, CPGs and how it's impacting that world, auto, politics, and health. It's sort of about 4 verticals that we've been focusing on lately. And there are general themes of disruption that I think impact everyone, but then they take different shapes in each of these sectors. For instance, consumers now are in almost complete control of their media experience. We say that offhandedly, but I'm not sure we always appreciate how fundamental and radical a shift that is. This level of personalization of media experience is a real tectonic shift from everything we saw before it. It's a fundamental change in context. Just think about this for a second. In the 20th century, media was defined, electronic media, starting with the rapid printing press in the late 19th century, going into film, radio, TV, and even the early days of the internet, was all defined in which the media experience was defined in physical, social, or temporal contexts. We knew where it was being consumed mostly, except for maybe magazines, but even magazines had a particular time frame. There were movie theaters. We knew that people were going to theaters in the evening or on the weekends. Primetime TV, we knew what those 4 hours were about at night. Even afternoon radio during the 30s and 40s, we knew, and that's where the soap operas came from, we knew that what women were doing in the afternoons when they were listening to radio. There was a defined and contained context and media experience within which we were working. Even the early internet, when I was covering it back in the 80s and 90s, was really defined by office use and home use and particular time periods. And advertising was being bought according to those time frames. But now mobility has really changed that in a radical way. We are in the context of no context. And that, for media planners and buyers, that's a fundamental shift. That's tectonic. We haven't seen this before. Now we're starting to talk about how mindset, how place, how need, how place within the consumer journey, that's the new context. And we've all been upended by this, and I think we're only starting to appreciate the ways in which all of these interruptions are happening. Because after all, most of 20th century media, the way I defined that picture of media was it created interruptive advertising. We needed to interrupt a fairly defined experience to get people's attention. But as we blow apart that context now, and we no longer can depend on all of those old contexts, interruptive advertising no longer makes sense. A friend of mine from one of the major ad agencies put it really well the other day. He said, we can't advertise ourselves out of this because we're not sure that advertising as we've known it is even going to work anymore. That's the situation we're in. And of course, one of the early ways that we've been trying to deal with that problem is by leveraging technology, leveraging data to access this fragmented attention and to try to follow the user in all those different contexts. And into a particular vertical like healthcare, where there are whole hosts of sensitivities around user data, around regulatory environments, around creative constraints. And that's what we're going to try to deal with here. We're calling it the retailization of healthcare marketing, and we're going to try to understand what that actually means in a variety of different areas. We've already seen this taking place. This isn't something that just happened in the last couple of years, of course. We saw already in pharmaceuticals that physician-based marketing was already starting to move towards the consumer sector. We know the ways in which the ACA moved a whole category of insurance providers who tended to be focused on B2B marketing suddenly into the B2C space. And we're actually going to be hearing some stories today about that transition. But in that consumer-controlled media world, where patients have an unprecedented access to information, now everybody is a retailer. Virtually all aspects of the chain now have to speak to consumers in ways, conduct and build relationships that they maybe never had before, or start talking to consumers in ways that they never conceived of before. And today we're going to try to break this down a little bit to make it a little manageable from at least our lens at MediaPost and how we look at these things, and look at the ways in which our focus is shifting, the way where the money's going, the way in which messaging is changing, the way in which we're changing our notion of data, how it's gathered and how it's used, and how media is bought and sold. So we're going to start, I'll briefly move you through the agenda and what we're going to do together. We're going to talk about retailization, what it means to a variety of sectors, how people are dealing with it and conceiving it and executing it in strategies. Then we're also going to talk about data. And the ways in which data is being gathered differently, how it has to be gathered and used within the constraints of the healthcare industry, but also the ways in which data, which we tend to see as a cold and removed entity, the ways in which data really can be leveraged to make messaging and relationships more human. And that's something that's at a premium in this sector especially. One of the big stories outside of healthcare, in fact, all of digital media and marketing now, is the rise of the D2C brand. The ways in which digital native brands in virtually every business category now, categories that we never imagined before, teeth straighteners for God's sake, pharmacies, insurers, are now growing out of the digital firmament and building brands simply out of digital. This is something in areas we had never considered before, but they're also using techniques, technologies, approaches, and relationships with consumers that have a lot to teach legacy brands. So we're going to talk to some of the D2Cs today about what they have to show, what they've learned from a purely digital relationship with customers. The other great phenomenon of digital disruption, of course, has been social, but that has, especially within the health segment, has a really mixed history. It is, of course, a font, a gusher of misinformation. It is the place where all bad health information can be found, is somehow on the social channels. But it is the channel that may be the most promising, if used well, to really serve as a groundwork for educating consumers and patients, but also building relationships. We're going to look at how we can start leveraging those channels more effectively. And then finally, healthcare, and I cover a lot of different verticals. I have to admit, healthcare is one of the few areas of advertising where the people who create the advertising admit that the creative sucks. And I find that, by the way, I find that really refreshing because almost everybody else in advertising thinks their creative is gold. But in this area, it is a common challenge that almost everyone seems to be honest about in this field, and I find that refreshing and a good starting point. And we're going to round out today by talking about how creative gets better, where we're seeing it get better. And we're going to see examples, I think, of that throughout the day. And we're also going to do some case studies. We're going to have Cindy Donahoe, who's the CMO of Highmark Health. She's going to talk about how they rebranded and turned around a number of their brands and changed their approaches to consumers and to creative. We're going to hear from Kimball Wilkins of Blue Shield of California, and she'll discuss their research into consumer attitudes towards insurance companies and how that fundamentally changed not only their messaging and approach to consumers, but also their infrastructure and the ways in which they organized internally. And Amy Fries of Be The Match is going to show how their effort leveraged multi-channel marketing to diversify their base and to talk to different audiences and to build authentic conversations with consumers in a different way. So we have a lot of ground to cover today. I want to thank all of our speakers, of course you. We're going to have Q&A at the end of every session. I'll be walking around with a microphone, so please feel free to stand up and ask a question. Also, thanks to our sponsor, Sitecore. They have a table right out there. Please visit them during one of the breaks. So, to start, let's take up and pull back and look at that big question of retailization. What does it mean? What is this new consumer journey that's going on in the healthcare world, and how do marketers respond to it? How do they reorganize? How do they locate that consumer? How do they talk to consumers differently? To take the lead on this big question, we have an old friend of MediaPost who's good at big questions, Jordan Green. He's the partner of mobile media at Mela Media. He helps lead brand strategy for many of their clients, especially the mobile division. He's worked with brands like IDT Telecom, Johnson & Johnson, Publishers Clearinghouse, and Madison Square Garden. Please welcome an old friend of ours, Jordan Green.
Thank you for making time to join with us, especially when the U.S. Senate had the audacity to counter-program. Year 2018 marks my 20th year in mobile. When I got started, it wasn't even called mobile, it was called wireless, and that wasn't nearly as exciting. But mobile has become the undeniable cornerstone of this evolution of digital and digital marketing. Understanding how to navigate this environment, as well as what a client's business actually is nothing short of a modern-day necessity. Healthcare and pharma marketing are perfect examples of that. For years now, I've said that after working with J&J, bring on any government agency in the world. But, now I say that in jest, but one way or another in pharma, all roads lead to the FDA, or at minimum, attorney review, and I'm pretty sure everybody in the room can appreciate that component. For advertising, this means how do you express fair balance information inside comparably smaller digital ad units, while still satisfying your market and getting your marketing message across? How do you satisfy your commercial and regulatory arms at the same time while using these great new advertising tools and digital media? And how do you leverage this advanced marketing data without violating any sort of PII? So marketing in this environment requires a great deal of understanding, balance, and creativity, and a good amount of determination with which to cross those legal waters. But the opportunity to reach your potential client, your customer, your patient, at the end, in the flow of their daily lives, with information that's critical to them, is just too powerful. So today we have three panelists who are here to help illuminate the different aspects of healthcare marketing. So going down the line, Nixad Elaverde, how'd I do? Okay, just checking. John Kigden and Ted Lawson of Endo Pharmaceuticals. So one of the things, to get started, I've spoken to each of you separately, is there's a commonality that the consumers don't need you guys until they need you. And that's probably not true for most of pharma as well as much of healthcare. So does that mean that search is the top of your funnel consistently?
So search, whether you believe it or not, it's both the top and the bottom of the funnel. Courtesy of the FDA, we've had to change our ways we approach media. A lot of us run unbranded sites and run search. When you start, and we start targeting you before you've gone to the doctor, before you've gotten that diagnosis, and we say, hey, you're having a little trouble. Why don't you come to this website? And we'll start targeting you that way. We'll start focusing on your conditions through keywords, unbranded ad copy that doesn't look pharma related. And then as you kind of progress and then go to the doctor for your diagnosis, we then change out our ad copy, our web domain, everything. And kind of just, and what we're there to do essentially is help pull you through the patient journey, or the top of the funnel all the way down to the bottom of the funnel when you're at the very bottom trying to research the brand of prescription that you've just received. So it's not necessarily the top or the bottom, it's enclosed in the whole way, it's just how we fit into it.
Ted, you have a very specific product going for a very specific audience. Is search the necessity? Is it your first go-to?
It is. So what we did a couple of years, or last year actually, we did some pretty in-depth patient journey research in the B12 market for the bariatric space. So if you can imagine a bariatric patient that's had surgery, they've had a partial or full removal of their stomach, they no longer can absorb B12 naturally, right? So they have to have a way to get B12 that bypasses the GI tract. So what we learned in that research is they start researching their surgery in that procedure very early on, sometimes years before they actually get to a surgeon or a surgery center to have the procedure done. So for us, search is important because we know that they're looking early, and what they need to learn early is about the nutrition options, right? So for us, it's B12. So it's a critical part of the journey for us on the patient side.
So the ability to insert your brand, even while somebody is concerned about the very surgery that they're going, you guys are the secondary component, but you want to be inserted right in the beginning.
Right at the beginning, because every bariatric surgery patient is going to need to be on a B12 therapy for life. So we want to be there from the very beginning.
And Nixad, you guys have had a revolution in search, so to speak.
Yeah, so senior living isn't really something that you research in your free time. It's, you know, it's not something that you really look for until you have a need for it. So we do very heavily rely on search. But then once we do, you know, once they do come in and get to the site and start to poke around, most of what we do is sort of like holding their hand down the sales funnel, I like to say. So helping them try to figure out how to have those tough conversations, how to make those tough decisions, and it just feel like they're not so overwhelmed, because it is it's a very overwhelming time in a person's life when they have to start looking for, you know, a place to put their mom, you know, or their father, or whoever it may be. So the combination of really not having any existing knowledge about what senior living is, and then the emotional side of it really makes it so that we have to, you know, both work on the organic side, but also, you know, stuff like email nurture campaigns to try to get them to figure out how to have those tough conversations.
Okay, I mean, and considering we're about plus 3 years, give or take, where Google made everybody take their medicine, saying search is on desktop, it's on mobile, it's on a tablet, you don't get to choose anymore, it's just search, search. Where does mobile fall into that overall equation? So we've got the media of search, but where do you find people engaging using a mobile device? Is it right after they get bad news?
Well, I mean, I personally think that the mobile device is obviously becoming the first place they go, right? It's the easiest, the most convenient. And as a matter of fact, right now, we're actually retooling our 4 websites for our brand because they weren't mobile friendly. They were developed years ago, before that was really the norm. And so just this week, we went through the MARC review, our med-legal regulatory review process, which we have to do for everything. We watered them way down, and we approved them, right? So, but I think we're going to be in a much better place moving forward, having a mobile-friendly, or actually optimized for mobile platform in 2019.
So a point of clarity is 3 or 4 years ago, Google made us bite the bullet and say you can't have mobile, desktop, tablet. They actually reverted that about 1.5 years ago. They'd make it tricky, they won't tell you, but any search operation that's worth their weight knows how to do it. And so what we've discovered is mobile, yes, mobile is our highest source of traffic volume these days, depending on, but it also heavily depends on the demographic. What we also discovered with mobile is its sense of immediacy. Oh no, I'm not feeling good. Oh no, I'm having trouble breathing. Oh no, I might have diabetes. So what we find is it's a shorter tail, broader search, higher up the funnel when it comes to mobile. And then when we actually get down to the research phase, they often move to desktop or tablet. So we kind of adjust our strategies and how we target people with what keywords to buy a device going forward.
Yeah, and for us, it's kind of difficult because, again, you don't do any research into senior living usually until you need it. And when you do the research, it's not, you know, it's not a single session thing. You know, you got to go, you got to do the research. You're looking at a few communities in your area probably, or what's on the way to work, or whatever's convenient. And you might make the decision across 4, 5, 6, or 7 sessions. So we see, and you might even pick up the phone and call when all said and done. You might not even submit a form online. So a lot of times, because there's so much thought that has to go into it, we see a lot of people doing the research on like a tablet, or for instance, like if there's a fall, if there's some sort of event that happens that sort of snaps it into focus that, okay, I got to look for something now. You know, usually people will be in the hospital, and so we've had some middling success with like geofencing. So trying to target people when they're actually in the hospital, sitting in the waiting room, because that's the time when they're thinking about it. That's the time when it's top of mind. And so, you know, we try to just make sure that that we're optimized across the board, tablet, phone, whatever it is, and yeah. It's a mix in terms of where we see the actual conversions, so it's hard to say.
Yeah, so now we're back to, as you're trying to market in different ways, you're talking about multiple touch points across multiple platforms,
Yeah.
which that's a lot to put on any marketer who's first trying to jump into this, whether we want to call it consumer, whether we want to call it patient advertising. Do you have to become an expert on day one, or can you start farming out some of that expertise to bring it in to get smarter?
Well, for a good example, this year we partnered with CMI Media on our non-personal platform for a couple of reasons. One, I'm on a smaller brand, don't have huge budgets. Was able to come to an agreement and work on what's called a gain share program, so it was mutually beneficial for us. But it allowed me, I'm not a complete expert in all digital, to partner with a company that is an expert in something digital and beyond. Right? It was a multifaceted, kind of a surround sound approach to non-personal promotion, where we did everything from your traditional direct mail and banner advertising to very specifically targeted emails, and had a tremendous amount of success with that in this year.
So to try to reframe that, because the first time when we spoke about this, I had to let you tell me twice. So essentially that you've gotten a media company to come in with you and partner, as opposed to just being a client of theirs, and they'll take on some risk, but they also share in the reward.
Correct. So rather than doing everything fee for service like we would traditionally do, we set up a very stringent test and control group. So we would target the test group with all of the non-personal tactics, and then leave the control group agnostic to all of those tactics, right? And then we would measure the upside at the end of each quarter, and we would split the upside. So while I was responsible for the creative and creating the asset, they took on the responsibility of the cost associated with all of the delivery, printing, everything else that went along with that. So it was a great partnership. It just worked very well.
Okay, so they'll bring the target into the equation, and some of it is traditional media, some of it is digital media as well, right?
That's correct.
I mean, I'm a little bit biased just being on the agency side, so I make my bread and butter off you all farming it out to us. But client side or brand side, agency side, the reality is, yes, you can learn along the way, but by the time your team has learned it, you've fallen way behind, and you're not competing for a #1 spot or a #4 spot. You're an afterthought is the reality. I've been saying this for years. The most important thing you can ever have for any digital operation is the people and the talent. If you want, and you can't really survive in the space without a good multi-touch attribution modeling, especially when it comes to healthcare and pharma, because you're trying to do each touch point. So the biggest thing I say is, if you can't find someone, some geographic restraints and most common reason, to run it, like a simple data scientist or an advanced analytics, then you have to start looking to outsource and going possibly to an agency or a one-off freelancer with a reputable or with a good reputation in the space. You can, like I said, you can learn it. By the time you've learned it, you have fallen too far behind that.
So that'd be, hold on, so far that's 2 votes of you need to farm out at least a good portion of it in order to be able to stay competitive.
You can farm it out. So the reality is, if you're not in one of the major metros that are digital hubs, your Californias, your Austin, Boston, Chicago, New York, Philly, you're probably going to have to farm it out. If you're in one of these major metros, you throw out the right dollar amount, money talks, and you can get the right talent. That's just the reality. But if you're not, then you start running into problems. And I've dealt with healthcare clients for 10 years. Almost everyone wants someone on site. And that's part of the problem, is if you can't have them on site and you don't live in a desirable area, you're not going to be able to hire that talent in-house.
Because historically for the pharma industry, we've seen them, they want to bring everything back in-house, they want to farm everything out, they want to bring it back in-house. And reality is, I think you probably need a balance of both. I agree with what you're saying. You want real expertise of the advanced stuff. You're going to need people on the outside to keep you on that, right on the crest of that wave. But at the same time, for the bread and butter, you can start bringing it back in-house. For example, stuff like Facebook is becoming incredibly popular for telecom. That's the wrong answer here. Healthcare companies. I'm at the wrong conference. Healthcare companies to start bringing it back in-house because they want more control over it. But at the same time, they end up missing out on perhaps some of the advanced features that Facebook could potentially offer them.
So one of the big things that we always recommend is, if you insist on having some degree of it in-house, farm out the sausage making, farm out the hands-on analytic attribution modeling, but make sure you have someone in-house that's smart enough to know how to interpret this data, translate this data, and call the farmed out operation on their BS. Are you good? Are you not? Is this real or not? Because I mean, I've been doing this for almost 15 years. There is a lot of hacks in our industry. That's just our reality. So the key is finding the right ones and making sure someone who can identify the right one.
All right, Nick Zod gets the final word on this because he's the one that runs right on the fence. You have both sides where you guys have developed an in-house marketing team, significantly so, and you've been there for most of it, right?
Yeah, I've been at 5-star. It's going to be 7 years in October, so yeah.
So you've got some of it, but then you farm some of it out as well.
Yeah, so it's, overall, I would have to say we farm it out, and I rely heavily on people like John. And part of that is because about 4 years ago, we made a real shift to a sales culture, a more sales-centered culture. So our current VP of Sales and Marketing, Rob Poyes, came in from Starwood, and it was a bit of a shift from what people had known before. It was a lot of local commercials on not public access, but local TV or local news channels reaching out and saying, hey, we can do a paid search campaign for you. You'll have crazy results. And then they send them to me, and it's just like, why are you wasting your money? And we have you pay for this almost already, because we work with people like John on the corporate level. And the other thing is, with that shift, a lot of the things that we had just assumed as givens about senior living, we had to sort of shift. Like, we hadn't done retargeting really, or we'd done paid search, but with middling results here and there. So trying all these new approaches is it's just trying to get your footing, see what works, see what doesn't, because with that shift, everything sort of changed. But in terms of things like Facebook, I have a small team, so it's difficult to say, but we're finding that it's in our best interest to have the people, team members of the communities actually run their own Facebook pages. There's something about that direct contact, or knowing that you're speaking or commenting on a post by somebody who's actually at the community and cares about your aunt so and so or whoever it is. It really makes a big difference in making people feel secure about the decision that they made and where they put their loved one.
Makes sense. And because I love your thing about you have to hold their hand down the funnel, and it really makes a lot of sense, especially because you're not selling to the person who would be buying themselves. You're selling to somebody else that's in their family.
Yeah, so it's sort of split. So we have independent living, which is like lowest level of care, and I like to think of that as like a glorified condo where you have happy hour, they shovel for you, they have speakers come in, all sorts of activities, and you're around people, the same age as you, you're with your peers. So for that sales process can be 2-3 years, because maybe you're living in Minnesota and you have to sell your car and your house, and you want to move to Florida or wherever it may be. But then on the other hand, if you're in any of the other lines of business that we have, or service lines that we have, assisted living, Alzheimer's care, or skilled nursing, those are not something that you're going to be looking for yourself. It's usually the adult daughter's the decision maker, and whether or not it's divided up between the siblings or whoever it may be, it's usually that adult daughter. So,
and at the same time, what I think is interesting is for any type of advertising you're doing, you have to show the person that's in the living situation, but you have to show them 10 to 15 years younger.
Yeah, so we found that there's a very immediate, there's like a snap judgment that happens in people's minds. So if it's an independent living resident, for instance, let's say they're 75 or so, and they're trying to figure out where they want to go, and they're poking around, and they go on our website, or they see an ad somewhere, and if we show them somebody that is the same age as them, they have a visceral reaction like, that's not me, I'm not that old. I'm much more spry and young than that. So we find ourselves having to find people that are probably 15 years younger than our target, or the average age of our residents, to make sure that we don't put them off by making it seem like they're a place where all those stereotypes that exist about assisted living communities, where people are unattended, sitting in a wheelchair in a corner. You know what I mean?
So you've got average age is 82, and you're advertising it with a 67-year-old.
Essentially, yeah.
To feel spry, which is pretty funny because the word spry is never used for anybody under the age of 65.
Yeah, ride around on dual bicycle, tandem bicycles, and all sorts of stuff like that.
For sure. Now, when you start putting together audiences, Ted, and I'll start with you because you're looking for a very specific audience, and you have to sell through physicians primarily, right?
Right.
How do you start developing who those audiences are, and how do you effectively go target them?
So there's really two sides to our business, right? There's the bariatric side, which is what you're speaking of, right? Which is very specific. The nice thing about the bariatric side of our business, it's a niche, and we fit very well there. And not only do they get a prescription B12 medication, but for the bariatric patient, they have to be on a host of other vitamins and minerals that are required by the ASMBS for them. That's chronic, right? So we provide them their prescription B12, but we also bundle that with a multivitamin of calcium and iron. So the way we target that in that patient journey, once that patient identifies the surgery center or the surgeon that they're going to use for their surgery, they go through a 3 to 6 month process before they actually have the surgery that's defined largely by managed care. And in that process, they're going to have a touch point with a bariatric coordinator, a dietitian, and the surgeon. So with any given office, we identify where in that process is the best place to introduce our program. And then we insert the program at that point based on each individual office. So it's not a one size fits all. It really depends on how the office processes the patient. Normally, it's with what you expect, the dietitian. They have a first or second consult, and they have the introduction to their vitamin minerals and what they're going to need for basically the rest of their lives. And we try to insert ourselves there. That's the most efficient. The other side of that is our sales force, while small, is pretty nimble, and they actually attend what we call pre-op meetings, where it'd be a meeting similar to this, right? And there might be 20 or 40 patients that are going to have bariatric surgery in the next 6 months to 6 weeks, and we present the program there. That's the most successful place to do it because we have control, but it's obviously not the most efficient.
From a tactical standpoint, the B12 inhalers, that's your primary component you're selling, but they need all these vitamins and minerals. You're selling those too, right? It's not like, and if you act now, we'll throw in a second dosage of, right?
No, it's one program, one package that they get. So it's not really a sale, it's more of a free good.
Okay. And now, John, your specialty is being able to pluck the right audiences out from a larger marketplace as opposed to the old school shotgun, spray and pray approach. How are you going about building separate audiences for different types of products?
So there's a couple ways we go about it, and what we do is we try and join it together ultimately. What the nice thing we can ever have is not starting a site from scratch, so we can actually pull demographic data, likes, interests, household income, gender, race, etc., and start pulling that data together through back-end analytics. Then what we also do is we go to the brand. So I had a Medicare client. What we did was we started looking at their back-end data, saying this is the age of the person researching. This is for the actual target that they're eligible for. And then we started joining these together and kind of we had to take some liberty and say, all right, this individual is probably very big on sports. This one is more likely to be a stay-at-home mom, stuff to this degree. Start marrying this data together. And then what we do is we build audience segmentation lists and say, all right, you have to hit X, Y, Z criteria because you're going to get a very specific message. And we'll do a control and then a tailored messaging or copy, if you will, for each individual to see which kind of pushes forward, and then we continue to do that. But we've discovered is what separates digital from traditional is, as you say, we're not spray and pray. We might not reach as many eyes, but we're going to reach a higher volume of qualified eyes, and that's where ultimately is I have to put a price point on each individual that I reach. Say, all right, I need to get the right audience tailored down to X, Y, Z number so that we can actually hit our CPA targets for each acquisition of lead.
And when you're going down this road, do you find it, are you a tough sell into a pharmaceutical? We've seen pharma be very, very slow to engage in digital, which amongst other reasons is why the show has come to be. We're trying to continue to push this along in a smarter way. But my question for you is, you have to go into somebody who's been buying print, and been buying radio, and been buying even local TV, not local TV, not public access, different. But they've been buying all this stuff all of these years. Is it hard for you to sell it into them as an idea?
So the way we do it is, it's not hard. We just have to make the case. What we're saying is, look, keep your TV, keep your print. You shouldn't get rid of it. We're not going to be able to 100% replace it. What we're saying is we're much more cost efficient. So instead of spending $5 on TV, spend $4.95 and give us that 5 cents to digital. We'll be able to supplement that and start showing, look, we can reach an audience. Honestly, traditional print, radio, TV, it still feeds down to the digital media. If you got the money, which some of the bigger pharma companies do, or some of the bigger healthcare companies, we can start doing a cross-trying of traditional media and digital media together and say, look, they all work symbiotically, and we can finally understand who's reaching what, and it helps us influence our decisions later. So the big thing is, it's not hard to get them to buy in. It's hard to get them to deviate some of the dollars and say, look, we're going to help. You don't need to take 20% of your budget away. You need to take 1% of your budget away and let me work with it.
So if I can sum that all up, I would say digital, great enhancement to traditional media.
Bingo.
I would say it is significantly, and I would use the word cheaper option than buying more stuff.
Cost efficient.
Cheaper. And but there is a balance to be able to do both, especially when you're talking about a new medication that might have cost $750 million to $1 billion push to develop. You think they can throw a couple cents your way in order to be able to test this stuff out in a very precise way, right?
Yeah.
Next slide. Now you guys are doing stuff that is, we're going to call it more cutting edge, especially for senior living. You guys
Sure.
are doing more with, sure, take that. We'll go from there. You guys are experimenting a lot with video now.
Yeah, so with that shift, we started to look at all different sorts of media. So at first taking stock of what was being used, so radio spots, TV spots, the shotgun approach, as you said, and just trying other things out, seeing what would work. So we had there was a campaign that Chevy did called Day It Forward, where I think it was something like they'd give somebody like $1,000 to go and quote unquote pay it forward to anybody and record it and send it in, and they would promote it. So there was a YouTube personality, Mike Tompkins. He's like an a cappella singer, and he took the opportunity to take that money, and he took it to one of our communities in Tennessee, I believe. And he created one of those videos where people make like a popping sound with their noise or some sort of noise with their mouths, and then he splices them all together into some continuous song. And I think he did a video for the Democratic National Convention. Like, it was very similar to what we had done, but he did a video with the residents, recording the audio and then splicing it together into a song/video. But he also took the money from Chevy and sort of did a remodel of their TV room. So we saw that come through, and it had a lot of success. People really loved it, and so we partnered with him to do a series of videos for us. So we did, for the holidays mostly, so Thanksgiving, Valentine's Day, stuff like that. And we did another campaign, Older and Wiser. So very simple, just a camera in front of a couch, and then we had our residents come in and sort of give their life advice on certain topics. And so we've been working that into pre-roll or Facebook, even Facebook advertising. Yeah, it's more like brand level, because it's hard to attribute a conversion or an actual phone call or a form submission to the work that we do with these videos, either on YouTube or wherever it may be. It's more brand level maintenance and trying to keep that faith or instill that faith in people that 5-Star knows what it's doing, and if you choose to move your loved one into a 5-Star community, you know that they'll be taken care of.
So you did social video with a YouTube influencer for an old age home, so to speak.
Yes.
Can we agree that that's pushing the envelope?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Because that is the more advanced stuff that we would see on traditional consumer brands trying to get their stuff in the flow of a consumer's everyday life. Now here you are making these videos with somebody who you're paying, by the way. These guys don't do it out of the goodness of their heart.
Yeah.
You're paying them, they're creating these videos for you, and then you're repurposing them as YouTube spots that go pre-roll.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
It sounds like you could be any product in the world.
I guess, yeah. It's nice to be, having come in before all of that, it's nice to see that change and sort of see that move into the cutting edge side. So it's been a fun ride over 7 years.
From our side, at Mellon Media, we're constantly looking for examples out in the real world of campaigns that are, and we're going to be more specific, errors that are being done by either our clients' competitors or just other companies in general. And over the summer, we ran across one for Aleve. They ran a just short of horrible mobile campaign in partnership with Fandango, where the ads were all the wrong size, the print was too small, shoving fine print for a contest into a 300 by 50 ad. And all we could think of is, thank God they didn't have to put any fair balance language in there as well, because they would have just shoved it smaller and smaller. The consumer activation was way too long, especially for the mobile consumer, which has the attention span of a fleet. Okay? And it was likely, you look at this and you just know this is an incredibly expensive endeavor that Bear went down because they trusted their particular agency. What it showed to us most of all is, we've seen it over and over. Most agencies still don't know how to do mobile. But what we've seen more and more is that companies are still trying stuff, which is good, but they may be heading down the wrong road. So I guess my question to you guys is, what are some of the don'ts that you've come across in trying to execute campaigns? What are the ones that you feel like you've messed up on potentially in-house, but try to remedy going forward? Ted, I'm looking at you.
I mean, for me, it's the easy. I think trying to put too much into one space, like similar to you're speaking about, and And I think we're guilty of that as well. Even when it comes to basic digital campaigns on email, we try to put too much there. You know, we're unfortunately so regulated that we have to water down a lot of what we say, a lot of the claims. You have to have the balance. So you're forced to have a lot of copy just by the nature of our business. But we try to get as many claims in there, which then duplicates the balance of the copy. So I think for me, probably one of the things I'm most guilty of is trying to put too much into one and try to get it all at once instead of trying to spread it out and do smaller messages over a more frequent basis.
And so it comes down to it's creativity, right? You've got to be smart about the words you can
Yep.
use and ones you can't use, right?
So, I've been fortunate enough, knock on wood, to not have a catastrophe when it comes to healthcare pharma. Worst idea that we've ever done, the worst thing we ever had to execute on that was a client mandate was a Snapchat crown for a health insurance company. This was a couple years back. Terrible idea. I digress. Honestly, though, like I said, I've been fortunate I haven't had a catastrophe, and that's because, it's going to sound weird, but I believe in fear-based management for my team. Whenever I don't bring new people, new to the industry, new to the company, fresh out of college, onto a healthcare or pharma team. We are the most highly regulated in the country. Initial FDA fines start at $200,000, which is usually more than your retainer for your agency. My team, whenever you bring someone in for healthcare pharma, they should be immediately trained. Drexel and Villanova University offer great day classes on healthcare and pharmaceutical advertising rules and regulations. They will help certify you. Biggest way to avoid it and the biggest way to deal with the problem is prevent it before it happens. The best way to do that is education and say, look, if you screw up, it's going to cost you your job, if not a lot more for the company. And knock on wood, we haven't had these issues. A little grim, but that's reality.
So Grim's okay. Exactly. What about you?
I mean, we're still finding our footing. Thankfully, we haven't had a catastrophe either. But with the nature of the sales cycle being as fragmented as it is, you know, we just try to make the information available that will help them make the decision. We try to parcel it out into different packages, or just make sure that it's you know, optimized so that whatever device they're looking on, it's something that they can read, that they can understand, and if they need to get in touch with somebody, you know, they can click the button and place that call wherever they may be, because you never know. You know, holidays is another time when I gave the example of a hospital before, but holidays, you know, maybe you go home for Thanksgiving, and you realize your mother hasn't been upstairs in 6 months. She physically can't, and so you know you get a spare moment. You might go out on the porch, and you do that quick search, and start the process there. So thankfully, you know, no catastrophes. We're still finding our footing.
All right, John may have said he went grim, but you get the prize now for grim. Okay. Mom
Apologies.
can't get upstairs. Nice. But the nature of the products that you guys have to advertise for is rarely one touch done, right? It's not like they're searching for you, done, I want to buy and convert. How many times do you need to touch these people? And at the same time, if you're putting stuff out there, search is a pull mechanism where, let's say your video ads are more of a push. Are there other areas that are in between? Are you using banner ads but in different placements?
Yeah, we're doing it all. I mean, again, with the program we ran this year with CMI, it was multi-channel, multifaceted. I'll go back to mention something said earlier by John, and that is, the one critical factor for me is, you know, we have to kind of pick and choose in small pharma where we're going to have our capabilities in-house. And for me, the most important capability we've had for sure is our insights and analytics team, because they really do help you define and hone in on where you need to be spending those dollars and where you need to be targeting. So, you know, we've kind of traded off at Endo in the past couple of years that digital capability for the insights capability. And coming from big pharma where you kind of take all that for granted and it's all kind of behind the scenes and it just kind of naturally happens, you really have to work for it in small pharma, and we've done a really good job at Endo of being able to do that. So we've been able to then take those insights and those analytics and really determine where we want to put banner advertisements, where we want to put the emails, where we want to put the direct mail, et cetera, so that we've had just that ability to touch people wherever they are and in a way that they want to be presented the data and the information.
John, what are you saying about how many times do you have to touch somebody? Well,
So
how many times do they have to touch you, I guess? Yeah.
No better.
Didn't sound better.
Especially today. I shouldn't make those jokes today at all.
So honestly, it varies what it is. Whether it's health insurance, I do a lot of urgent clinics. I do various pharmaceuticals. Urgent clinics, honestly, it's one and done because, well, it's an urgency. Yeah, it's an emergency. It's usually one and done, mobile quickly, and then we are able to track them all the way to our clinic. I have one pharma client that is a Narcan naloxone, so their goal is to reverse overdoses. We can't proactively market for that because there's not enough markets out there that's an appropriate venue outside of like a Narcotics Anonymous or within the doctor's office. So it's a very reactive search-only scenario. And often when they get to you, it's one and done because it's often a sense of emergency. I do an epinephrine drug or for anaphylaxis or peanut allergies, if you will. The research is done by typically the mother. It's usually for their child under the age of 8, and we'll usually see 10 to 12 touch points before they convert, or before they come to lead. Health insurance, when we deal with that, we're looking at up to 90 days with probably about 15 to 20 different touch points. So it really comes, there's no simple answer, but unless you are dealing with an emergency-based scenario, it's going to be at least 5 to 6 touch points.
Steve's got a microphone, so I'm going to if you have a question, put your hand up, he'll come around to you, but I'm going to ask more in the meantime. So in general, we see healthcare has more data arguably than any other industry that's out there. You're getting all this data in lots of different places. But there's always those, well, what can we use, what can't we use? And with so much opportunity in digital advertising as a whole, and the industry of healthcare, if I'm putting everything together, being lagging behind, why aren't we seeing more aggressive moves? Doesn't it seem like it's just screaming with opportunity?
It is, but I mean, in my opinion, it comes back down to our regulatory environment, right? So simple things like a Facebook page, right? I work with 2 different brands. I have an orphan disease drug it's in the pediatric space. And it's largely like you, it's a caregiver decision, right? It's not the patient. It's a child that's 4, 5, 6 years old in most cases. So they're obviously not going to make a treatment choice. Their parent is. And a Facebook page is the perfect opportunity to reach out to that community. But because of the regulatory environment, we just literally can't do it. So until we'll get there eventually. And I know many pharma companies are already using Facebook, and so we're trying to use precedent and all those things with our legal and regulatory team. But when you look at all the opportunities in the digital space that are out there today, our regulatory hurdles keep us, in my opinion, from getting there quickly. Not that we won't get there, it's just going to take time and trial and error before we're able to do it efficiently.
That makes sense. And just to highlight that point a step further, the gun-shy nature of the industry, we were supposed to have another panelist here today, and she was great. And she was brought in from outside the pharma industry to help rejuvenate kind of how aggressive they're being in digital marketing. And her bosses pulled her off the panel because they were afraid of the things which may or may not be coming out. Now, is the market as a whole 2 steps forward, 1 step back, or are we looking at 1 step forward, 2 steps back? Is everything just getting stuck?
I think it's the latter.
Because the FDA, the big panel sitting at the top, the FDA is scaring everybody that much?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to say it's the FDA scaring everybody. I think it's just the nature of pharma and where we've been, and the CIAs that are in place and the fines that have been levied, and the risk now to getting a warning letter or a fine, and what that means to the overall business is sometimes greater than the return for doing something kind of cutting edge or new and exciting.
So then, how do we get past that?
So, yeah, just to kind of piggyback on this, the FDA is one of our problems. The other problem is, especially for pharma and hospitals, it's very difficult to proactively advertise for some of this without violating someone's privacy. So last thing, I worked on GlaxoSmithKline for years. For some reason, I got stuck with the icky things for HIV, herpes, and incontinence. I can't proactively advertise onto someone's computer on one of their browsers off a behavioral metric if someone's been looking at that stuff and then their kid comes on or their spouse comes on. There's a huge privacy scenario that we have to also adjust with. Sometimes it's appropriate, a lot of the time, especially in pharma, it's not, because it starts to come into a degree of privacy violations. And the last thing you need is then you need a consumer to turn around and say, why am I being shown this? And next thing you know, you're on investigative news reports about being grossly inappropriate stuff. We've seen it before, so you also have to dodge that. So yes, we're overtly cautious because of the FDA and because of our brands, but some of it's going to protect you in the long run as well.
Is the nature of this, I mean, it's interesting because in technology and advertising as a whole today, privacy is obviously a big concern. It's constantly talked about. When we talk about pharma, we're talking about like privacy plus.
Yep.
Is it better to have that as the mantra to go through, as opposed to, are you better for your other clients because of that?
You can have that mantra, you can have it. The key and thing to remember though is if you're going to get fancy and cutting edge, make sure that individual is the individual you're trying to meet, that qualified individual, and don't make it a proactive media necessarily. Make it a reactive media scenario so that you can actually hunt them down. If I've watched 3 videos in a row about gastritis, then the 4th video, I could probably roll that ad back. You could start making sure that that in session is actually that still engaged consumer rather than my wife coming over to look at the computer afterwards.
I got it. You're talking about some specific targeting as opposed to hunt them down was probably not what you were going for there. But yeah.
Tell us who you are. And who
Oh,
you're
my name is Ellen Bollinger, and I work for Mother Jones and some other media organizations. And when we're trying to appeal to people like you, we're telling a qualitative story as much as relying on the big data about the audience. Do you, when you're buying direct, look at the trust or loyalty that a community has to the site they're on, or is it really just all analytics and data?
It's honestly, before we sort of made that switch 4 years ago, it was much more qualitative. But with all the new media, all the new things we're trying, it has been much more quantitative. So seeing those numbers come in are what is giving us the evidence to go to senior management and say, hey, you know, we've never done this before, but it's actually working, you know, like, and we can point to the numbers and say so. And I think until we get a firmer footing and just believing that it will work instead of having to really prove everything to get every single dollar, I think it's going to be a lot more of that, more quantitative.
But are any of you buying direct from some of the major sort of health-related sites like the WebMDs of the world, and are you convinced that those contexts really matter?
I mean, with the pre-roll ads, we have plenty of distribution networks, so we do. But again, it's hard to tie that conversion back. You know, it's more brand level or instilling that faith in people. So we do, and we know that we have a directional idea that it is working. So you know, as long as it's continuing to work, and we still see positive metrics coming from it, we're going to continue down that road, I think.
I guess this is open to all you guys, which is, as we go forward here, what's on your wish list? What do you think is what's the home run? What is the great opportunity that you see sitting out there?
Well, for me, it's moving to the next level for me. So we've done some pretty traditional grassroots kind of HCP marketing, digital marketing, et cetera. It's really now starting to tap into that patient journey I spoke of earlier with CRM type activities and really capturing those patients very early in their journey and being able to walk with them all the way through the journey to the end. And we think that is the next big step for us.
I mean, I believe the next big opportunity already exists. It's a matter of us accessing it. And the greatest thing we ever run into is a tying in of traditional and digital media together to really pinpoint an individual, to really say, all right, Steve, we're following you. We know what you've been to the doctor. Yes, we're going to be big brother, but that's the reality of it. And to start start engaging with a person the entire way through it, all the way from that initial radio commercial that we tracked back to your Android system within your car, onto a Google search, onto a YouTube, onto a Bing, and following them more thoroughly through. So we actually tie that. That capability still exists and already exists. It is incredibly expensive because there's not enough vendors that go into it. But we do believe that's there. As more vendors start taking on that capability, the price comes down. It's more reachable for everyone out there.
Exactly.
For us, I think it's more honing our content and how we deliver it. So as I said before, sort of holding people's hands down the sales funnel. You know, we'll send them. We'll do email nurture campaigns. We'll try to give them blog articles that sort of address those issues, those concerns that they have in their mind about how to have that conversation, or the finances about moving to assisted living and selling your house, or stuff like that. So you know, it's trial and error, because you'll send some. you'll insert some content, and it'll seem to do really well, and other stuff just falls flat on its face. So I think we're just over time honing and sort of sharpening the sword, if you will, to just be more efficient.
We have a couple of
We've
questions.
got a question over here.
I'm throwing in my 2 cents into what I think the big opportunity is. I think that if pharma as a whole, arguably the biggest challenge that they face every day comes in clinical trials and recruiting people for them. And with this era of all this data and all this advanced targeting, there's a mechanism with which we can do this smartly, with which to use mobile and digital as a mechanism to start recruiting people for these trials that could help expedite drugs to market, as well as significantly lower the cost of developing the drugs themselves. Over there.
That was actually one of my questions. My name is Deepika. I work at Bristol Myers Squibb. So the question is, what is your experience with marketing in clinical trials? Because they are hard to recruit without incentivizing the patient or the healthcare professional.
So I've marketed for that and received the ads for it. It's fairly straightforward. Honestly, I see this frequently overcomplicated. It's always a reactive, never a proactive media scenario. And it's always bid on the high-level conditions. So I'm lactose intolerant. So I search for research about lactose intolerance. The second or third ad I'll see is in regards to a clinical trial that I can sign up for, and it's going to be hyper-targeted to my geo area, so I'm not going to have to do a long drive. We see that in Facebook when I go and join the lactose intolerance group looking for different recipes and stuff. And it's just this type of behavioral targeting. Whenever I look for a recruitment-based scenario, it has to be reactive media because it tells us right away what we really need to focus on. And then as we start getting that inbound data, we start looking at who's really coming to engage with us, and then we refine our targeting and our dollar amount.
Yep. The challenge you end up running into also is the stringency of what the FDA is willing to accept on the far side. So it's not just that you're lactose intolerant. That ends up being the top of the funnel. They want you're lactose intolerant, you're over the age of 35, you're male, you live in the Midwest, you play on turf at night in a dome. And they really want all these combinations of things, which makes it much harder. But we have so much data, and we have so much better mechanisms now with which to target specific individuals, specifically on mobile, because very few people share mobile devices. It's an opportunity where we can get down to that 1-to-1 ratio. I think there's tremendous possibilities. It's a matter of putting the pieces together smarter.
One more question over here.
Beatriz Mallory, Census Health, thank you very much. Nixad, you mentioned in passing that you had, quote, middling success, unquote, with geofencing. Can you elaborate?
We have a few communities in Florida testing it out, and they're working with local news channels. So somebody will call them and say, hey, we can do XYZ for you. It'll be great. And the salesperson, well, a lot of times at the community levels, people have more of a nursing background, so they're not well versed in digital. Nor do they necessarily need to be. It's a very personal thing. So as long as you can have a genuine interaction with another human being, a lot of times, it's enough. So when I say middling, I say what I mean is conceptually, I think it has a lot of power. We haven't really gotten there yet, and I think part of it is we just haven't taken or looked at it as a sort of a portfolio-wide approach. It's just been here and there in smaller markets. So hopefully, it's something that we can work into our plans for 2019. But it's difficult to do that without having the quantitative results to show that it is something that will definitely be efficient for us.
Jordan, panel, thanks very much for getting us off to a great start. We did bring some chairs in. I think there may be a couple of seats around in here too. But I also wanted to mention that we are live streaming everything today over MediaPost.com. We are, after all, a media company. We are blogging it actively. If you go to the agenda site, if you go to the site for the event, you'll see a link to the live stream as well as our own blogging of the event. You can ping your colleagues back at the home office if they want to tune in live. We also archive all of this, so we will. So if you go back to the agenda site, probably tomorrow or the day after, you'll see videos for each of the segments, so you can refer to them later. So, by the way, I brought my own insurance company with me today. Highmark Health is my insurance down in Delaware. And in fact, one of the things that Cindy's going to be talking about now is the ways in which they rebranded Highmark Health, Blue Cross Blue Shield of Delaware. And that's one of the challenges that she had, that she's going to talk about today, is the ways in which you reposition and rebrand two brands that had challenges in the market, and the ways in which you do that through gaining new approaches to creative, new understanding of who your customer is and where they are, and how you communicate with them differently. Cindy is the Executive Vice President and Chief Marketing Officer for Highmark Health. She oversees branding, digital experience, for the health system, and health plan loyalty and acquisition. Before that, she was the SVP of Growth and Customer Experience at Anthem's Physicians Immediate Care. Please welcome Cindy Donahoe.
Thank you. So, ooh, I will not do that again, I promise. So good morning, everyone. How are we doing today? So again, I'm Cindy Donahoe, and maybe just to add to my bio to give me a little digital and a little retail cred. It's fun to be in meetings like this when we're talking about digital and mobile. I used to work at Netscape, if any of you remember Netscape, the first browser that was out there back in the day. I know that sort of gives you a clue as to how old I am. But I also worked at Walgreens. I led marketing for retail pharmacy and everything health related for the company. And most recently, before Highmark Health, I was out in Silicon Valley for a 30-person startup turning iPhones into EKGs. So I've had a lot of different types of retail experience. Right now I'm at the one in the center, that's Pittsburgh. Highmark Health, for those of you who don't know it, is a Blue Cross Blue Shield company for Delaware, Pennsylvania, and West Virginia. We also are the only Blue that happens to own a health system. So we have a $3 billion, 8-hospital system called Allegheny Health Network. We've also got retail, VisionWorks across the country, and dental across the country. And we're really fortunate to have two great partners, one in Detroit, which is Donor, one of our ad agencies, and the other in Rochester, which is Partners in Napier, and Courtney Katrup is here, and she's going to be on a panel later today. You know, it's funny because I'm going to talk to you about groundbreaking creative, and I'm pretty sure when you think Pittsburgh, Detroit, and Rochester, you don't think that's where you're going to get groundbreaking creative. But you might think raw, you know, real, authentic when you think of those cities, and I think you're going to see that a lot of that came through in the creative. I'm going to talk about two rather disruptive campaigns, two very different campaigns, one for Allegheny Health Network that was focused on quality, called Living Proof, and the other, Blue Hen, which was the work that we did in Delaware for the insurance side of the business. And these campaigns have amassed numerous awards. So at the Effies in North America, there are only 2 healthcare services awards given. Both of them were gold, and it was to these 2 campaigns, making Highmark Health, go figure, one of the top 10 most effective marketers in North America this past year. So to be up there with, you know, Mars and Kimberly-Clark and Unilever really made us very proud. But what was most important isn't about all the awards. Oh, and we got Clio's, and we got a Cannes Lion shortlist, and Telly's, and Addies, and so we really got a lot of awards for the work, but we really learned a ton. So with both campaigns, it was about that deep core insight. It was about tapping into raw, authentic emotion. And that emotion sometimes was tears and sometimes was laughter. And I'll show you a little bit of both of those. And then, of course, getting effective business results. So with Allegheny Health Network, our challenge was, how do we demonstrate that we have as good a quality as the larger health system in the market that had been at it for 25 years? We amassed a few hospitals together, introduced a new brand. It wasn't even 3 years old at the time, and so people weren't giving us as much credit for the quality that we had. So of course you're sitting there in your leadership meetings, everyone's like, just tell them we're number 1, use the claims, you know. But if any of you have driven around the country, I can drive through any town and see number 1 hospital claims on every billboard and every radio channel that I'm listening to. So the claim couldn't be it, you know, and if you talk to anybody that's recently been through a health situation, you know, they don't talk about, hey, I went to the number 1 hospital, right? They don't even talk about their medical outcome because they expect to be healed, right? They expect to come out well. They expect it's going to work out and their pain's going to be gone. So that's just a base expectation. What they do talk about They talk about what they can do now. They talk about their own outcome in their life. They talk about the people, right? So they do want innovation and advanced medical capabilities, but in the hands of a doctor who listens, right? And they do want that great medical outcome, but they want it delivered with compassion and with kindness. And so now we're like, all right, well, these guys had a 25-year head start. How are we going to change their minds? We need to do something that is really, we started using the words big, bold, and fast. And where we landed with Donor was on living proof. And it's really actually changed how we market everything. We are now proof over promises. Like, no more hype, no more how you're gonna, how we're gonna change your life. We're gonna show you evidence of how we've actually changed other people's lives. So living proof, showing that in act or quality that something is actually true. And we had sort of three components to this. One of the issues the brand was facing was that those who knew the brand loved the brand. Those who didn't know the brand didn't have much opinion about it. And so we're like, okay, well, we're not going to pull you all into the hospital. How are we going to get people, to really experience the brand? So I'm going to show you some ways in which we did that. The second thing was being insistent and persistent. We didn't have a lot of time. We needed to turn perceptions around. So we're like, all right, we're just going to overload them with examples. And we are going to be in their face and in their community, and they're going to see it. And they're going to hear it from friends, because we all know that's like our favorite type of marketing, right? Word of mouth, it's free, and you're more likely to believe it if it comes from your friends. So what we did is we set out with Living Proof to tell stories in a unique way. So we said, well, wouldn't it be cool if we could sort of show you life as it unfolds, like a day, what happened inside the health system today? Lots and lots of different stories. And what would it be cool if we did it in a real way, right? So more like a documentary. And that was hard, because we said, we're not going to tell you what happened yesterday. We're literally going to show you what's happening right now. We're going to take moments of joy, of triumph, of struggle, and in that moment, we're going to capture and let people basically be voyeurs and a little bit like a documentary, just sort of watch what's going on. But then just to make it a little bit more difficult, we said, well, we're going to do 30 of them, and we're going to do it in 30 days. So we set out, and I think we had the concept on June 30th. By mid-August, we were in market on TV. Told the press, told the community, we're doing 30 stories in 30 days. In the meantime, we're like, all right, we got to make 30 commercials. So we got on this cycle, and we're like 2 per day. You're shooting them on a Monday, you're editing them on a Wednesday and a Thursday, and you're releasing them to TV stations by Friday. And then you got to hope those stations are going to run only that day's commercial on that day, right? Because the whole idea is a different story every single day. And the best part about it was the authenticity. So the way we could do this was we didn't have sets, we didn't have soundtracks, we didn't have actors. This was just real, which also was risky because we didn't know what we were going to get. We didn't know, after hip surgery this morning, which we filmed, then we go film someone in the afternoon. It's like, is Anna going to be able to walk? I hope so, and then what's her reaction going to be? Is she going to cringe in pain, or is she going to smile and laugh with joy, right? So we just went with it, and so we did our 30 in 30 days. And so what I'd like to do is show you just 3 of the original ones, and watch for the difference in the style and the role of the clinicians.
Can you try writing for me? Okay, that's good enough. That's a good try there.
Can't do it.
I'm going to turn it on. Okay. Wow.
Quick.
Pretty amazing. Very good. Very, very good.
The #1 rated large health system for hospital and surgical care is Allegheny Health Network.
Okay, Karen, so it's on. Can you hear me?
I sort of forgot. I just like to hear.
There you go. That's great.
The #1 rated large health system for hospital and surgical care is Allegheny Health Network.
Like a diamond in the sky, twinkle, twinkle, little star, how I wonder what you are. What do you want to do for dinner?
Hope for families struggling with postpartum depression is at Allegheny Health Network.
All right.
So you can imagine, the variety of stories that we had. And they all were authentic. Like, okay, with Adriana and the last one and her dad, Stephen, what happened to them was a while ago. The new center wasn't open yet. But we said, well, where do you hang out? And they're like, a park in town. Great, let's go to your park. We're like, what songs does Adriana sing? And they're like, well, she likes Itsy Bitsy Spider and Twinkle Twinkle Little Star. We went with Twinkle Twinkle Little Star and asked her to just sing along, because at night she actually looks up and says her mommy's one of the stars every night, and that's how she goes to bed each evening. And so those were really sort of, some of them were dramatic, some of them really touching, we had little babies. But the other thing about this was a surround sound message. So we didn't just do 30 TV commercials. We did 30 radio spots that we had to swap out every day. We did the news ticker on the morning news. We did the front page strip at the bottom of the newspaper. We obviously had a whole ton of digital, and then everything that we're doing on the web. So like, it was just really every aspect we could do. We had out of home, we had billboards. And as a result, our unaided awareness went up 18 points during this period. And we actually retained that. 2 years later, we still have retained that unaided awareness. Our consideration went up nearly 20 points when we launched this campaign. And remember, this campaign for us was about quality. And so the most important metric is quality. Now, changing a perception in a market about quality takes a long time. But in 2 years, the difference between us and that other competitor is negligible. It's only 2 points now when it was double digits before. So we actually achieved the main goal we had, which was quality. We also had some other great results. Inpatient hospital volume went up 3%. Now that may not sound like a ton, but in our market and in the industry, the average was 1%. So we definitely outperformed the average. And then marketing, we do a marketing mix model where we could see how many of new appointments are driven by the actual media and marketing work that we've done. We went from driving only 17% of appointments to driving 34% of appointments. And again, we've maintained that. But you know, some of the fun part was, you know, you work with, I'm sure a lot of you work with physicians, and so you've probably heard the same things. Just put my face on a billboard and share my name and put me in print ads and people will come. And so we really had to re-educate them and say, sorry, you're not the hero anymore. You're the supporting actor. So you're going to play a role, but we're not going to talk about your role. They're going to infer your role. But the nice thing was, with all the stuff that we did on social, is the voices came out from the consumers. We could put a Life Flight helicopter ad, and we had people from 25 years ago sharing their stories about how Life Flight saved them. Or we'd put up, so we had Dr. Whiting there, and he's the neurologist, head of neurosurgery, who helped Richard. All these people who Dr. Whiting helped were sharing their individual stories. And so it really did have sort of this viral effect that we were looking for. The other thing we tried to do, remember I talked about experiences, and we were thinking big, bold, fast with everything we do. So we did some experiences that we would call larger than life. We built the world's largest arm cast. I think it was about 35 feet long. And we mended over 26,000 bones that prior year. So I said, all right, everybody who's had a mended bone at Allegheny Health Network, come sign the cast. And the first person to sign the cast was our Pirates catcher, Francisco Cervelli. And so we made a nice little media event out of that. Of course, when you're done with that, what do you do with a 35-foot cast? You know, we're planning. We made sure no one's going to get hurt and all that, but we never thought where we're going to put this thing when we're done. And then someone had the brilliant idea, well, let's just saw it in half and stick it on a billboard. And so that's what we did. We made a 3D billboard out of it. It was never designed for that intent. Went up in the winter, and I'll tell you, I drove by like once a week just to make sure that thing wasn't going to fall down or fall apart because it wasn't designed for that intent. But we also got an award for you know, the unique out of home. Another thing we did, so not a lot of people realize how many babies that we deliver within the health system every year. And the competitor was really known for being the place for women. But we deliver over 6,500. So we made it real. We made 6,500 storks, and we took them to like races, and we took them, you know, this one was Zubu, and we invited parents who've had children in our hospital system that year, as you could see earlier years, to come by, sign one of them, take photos with them, share it online. And so it was a really great way to get the point across very visually of just how big we really were. Another one that we did, we created the world's largest game of operation. And you know, again, with these things, you're like, they gotta be portable, you gotta be able to move them, you gotta have, you know, generators so they can have electricity. But we started it on Light Up Night, which is where in Pittsburgh we light the holiday tree. And so we gave out like little red noses that lit up for all the kids. But we took it all over the place to events, and we'd give the kids little lab coats, have the doctors there with them, and compete and try to play the game of operation. Really getting across the point, you know, just how many surgeries we do. But in the end, and I'm a huge proponent of ROI, and I've always been skeptical of events and things like these. You really get your ROI. What we saw was that those people who knew about the events, like 73% of them, brand favorability went up. And what we really took away from it was, may not have made them think we're higher quality, but it made them actually like us. So, so that helps a lot. And they got to experience something with us if they weren't in the health system. One of the other things that, you know, I already talked a little bit about social, but this was the first time ever that we got more volume organically than we did from paid. And so we had, like, for example, that postpartum depression spot got over 415,000 interactions and very quickly. And people were just sharing the story, so we didn't really have to do so much to share the story. So that was a huge component of it. And this is an example of that one with Alexis and with Stephen. And then the surprising thing about all of this, and maybe it shouldn't be surprising because what we were effectively doing was building a brand and a personality here, but it changed our company. It changed our culture. It came at a time when the hospital system and the health plan were coming together. And it became a rallying cry that united everybody and reminded us that it's not about us, it's about them. It's about our customers. It puts the customer first. And so that was really important. It was highlighted in our annual report. It became the name of our core behavior award. It's a living proof of core behaviors for the employees in the company. Even when we went out to rating agencies like Moody's and Standard & Poor's, we were asked to come along to those meetings to present the marketing campaign because it was that ingrained into what the company stood for, where we were going, and what was happening. The other cool thing about this style, so if you're thinking about how you apply authentic style, well, when you're doing 2 commercials a day, you're doing it at a pretty rapid pace. Our production costs were only about $50,000 per commercial. So now we chose to take that extra money and roll it into gobs and gobs of content. The other interesting thing was that content now is very digestible and very consumable. So over the last couple of years, we've had to really learn how long can a story last before it doesn't feel authentic anymore because you've seen it so many times. So you kind of have to rip through the content a little bit faster. But it also taught us, you know, what I'll call agile practices. I know a lot of you know agile in IT and in software development, but we really did have agile marketing practices, and it changed the way we do our work sort of permanently. So there are a lot of side effects that came out of it. And then to close this campaign, I just want to share with you a little bit of the retail side of it. So we're fortunate to have a health system that has tons of innovations and wonderful stories. We're like, we want an offer. Like we need something that's a call to action to do something now. And so what they gave us was same-day appointments. So we were the first, one of the first in the country actually, and definitely the first in our market to offer same-day appointments with all specialties. So cardiologist, a neurologist, an oncologist, whatever you want to see. Now, most people chose OBGYN and primary care and dermatology, but still, it was available to everybody. And so we made sort of a true retail slogan out of this. Call in by AM, be in by PM. So if you called 7-Eleven, we didn't guarantee, but you're pretty darn sure you're going to get an appointment that afternoon. When across the industry, it usually takes 3 to 4 weeks to get in to see a doctor. You're not calling in the morning and then coming back. And it's so gratifying. Like even last week, we had a patient who was at one of our offices who was crying because she was in a lot of pain. And she was going to a different health system, and they told her it was going to be a couple of months before she could get in. She got one of our direct mail pieces at home, called for a same-day appointment, was seen that day, was diagnosed, got medications to help with her pain. And so, you know, it just, even something like this just has such an impact. But we had so much fun with the same day. So we had this whole idea, let's own the morning, right? So turns out late night fringe was really important too. So all those people who are up at midnight, maybe they're sick. So that worked really well for us. We really drove the morning. And so we did things like the sleeves around coffee cups. And when you went to get your laundry, it said, gee, you can get your laundry same day on the hanger. You know, and it says, and now you can get your doctor's appointment same day too. We did stuff that markets like New York do all the time. We wrapped buses. We got every train in the train station. In our market, that was not very common. Pittsburghers don't market that way. And then we also did some sort of crazy things. We like to just be big and bold. We bought like 8 exam chairs, and just a warning, if you ever buy exam chairs and put them out in the public, take the stirrups out. People are very juvenile. Just have them removed. But we just wrapped them. And so during a race, we'd have a certain message. This was, I don't know what it was, maybe Picklesburg, people were shopping on the bridge, you know, and so we would just change out those messages. We'd plop them right outside the bus stop or right in the middle of the town square, and it was just like a random outdoor billboard. All right, I want to shift gears and just talk a little bit about Highmark Blue Cross Blue Shield of Delaware and our Blue Hen campaign. I'm not going to go into too much of the detail, but you can hear more in the last panel discussion because Courtney, who's the president of Partners in Napier, is going to go over some of this too. So with the very different situations, so not on the hospital side, totally on the health plan side, we're a leading provider in Delaware, and the state of Delaware is the largest account in the state, and we've had this account for years. And they decided that they were going to have 2 health plans in the year. And so instead of having both the HMO and the PPO plans, we were going to get the PPO, and a competitor who's not based in Delaware is going to get the HMO. And so this was not only a problem because of that, but our product was going to be more expensive. They were going to automatically enroll people in the other product. We weren't allowed to directly communicate with the people so that they could make a choice, and we had 90 days. So, you know, it was really one of those situations where like, oh my gosh, we're finding ourselves unexpectedly in this fight. And it was an interesting conversation, like, well, what do we do? How do we really like get into that core insight? And the core insight was Delawareans love their Blue Hen. It's a thing. So in Delaware, the Blue Hen, which by the way is actually brown, not a problem, we can't adjust in post-production with a little coloring, but it's brown. There's not a ton of them. It is the state bird, and also University of Delaware, they are the Fighting Blue Hens. And so the idea was, well, can we tap into that loyalty to this bird to remind people of their loyalty to Highmark, to Blue, who's always been there for you, and use it to talk about, you know, no specialist referrals necessary, no ruffled feathers, right? Or PPO plans that have your tail. We did some other retail things. It was around Easter, so we popped up 6-foot blue egg at the Easter egg hunt so that all the kids could play with and be around. But there's a lot of similarities between the work we did here and the work we did with Living Proof. Because again, you're going to see no paid actors, right? You're going to see not really any sets. Really authentic, super simple way of getting the message across. So let me just show you a little bit of that work.
The official bird of Delaware isn't red. It's not green or purple. It's blue. Coincidence? We think not. Highmark Blue Cross Blue Shield, Delaware. This blue hen was hatched in Delaware and raised in Delaware. Do you think he wants to call someone outside of Delaware? Here's a hint. Highmark Blue Cross Blue Shield, Delaware. This blue hen calls Delaware home. But every winter, he flies the coop for a week in Miami, where his only worry is remembering sunblock. Highmark Blue Cross Blue Shield, Delaware.
So that campaign ended up achieving our retention goals that we had, and we got over 10,000 people in addition to that to make the switch over. And it turns around the second year, it was even more effective and continued, and that might have been more of the service experience they had going to the competitor, but allowed us to really tap into Blue. And we had this big debate because we just had Living Proof out there, and we were rolling that out in all of our markets. And so I still remember, even though Partners in Napier had this great idea, I think you might have pitched 3 concepts that day. I missed the pitch, but then my team came back to talk to me about it, and they wanted to go with something that felt like Living Proof. And I'm like, what are you doing? Like, we have 90 days, and we need something disruptive. This is so ownable. This is so Blue. This is so Delaware. Let's just make sure it doesn't, you know, upset anybody in Delaware that, you know, we're not offending their bird. And so I'm so glad we went with that, because it had exactly the intended result that we wanted. And so I hope that you guys got some ideas about authenticity and retail marketing, and I'm open to take any questions you may have.
Hi, Cindy. My name's Scott Rabschnuk from Hill Holiday Advertising. Right here. Okay. I just want to congratulate you on those campaigns. I was actually one of the finalist Effie judges.
Oh.
So I remember both of those campaigns really well, and especially the Blue Hen campaign, which I know you couldn't really elaborate on. We actually called it a perfect Effie submission. And that was because, so just lessons for everybody. With Effies, it's not only the idea, but it's the degree of difficulty that you're facing. So you quickly went over that.
Yeah.
So could you maybe describe just a little bit about how you guys just kind of in that short of a time frame really kind of stacked up? What were you going to really kind of focused against? Because you had so many things that you were trying to overcome in terms of what had been handed to you.
Yeah. So, I mean, there were really two things. It doesn't always show up in surveys, but there is just the power of blue. You know, whether you like it or not, you all know blue, you trust blue, it's been there forever, it's stable, it's secure. So we really wanted to remind them, we're the blue. You know, these other guys, because in these markets, there's not a lot of familiarity with the national players when they come to market. They don't have as much of a brand name. So that was sort of first and foremost. The second thing I want to say is not only are we blue, we're local. I mean, we have thousands of employees who live in Delaware, who are from Delaware. We are right there for you. We understand you. We understand that healthcare is local and in your region. And then the last thing I'd say was, at least we had the PPO. Now, it may have cost a little bit more, but there were additional benefits to it. And you see we sort of tapped into some of the travel benefits that came along with it. We tapped into the specialist benefits that came along with it. So we really tried to just hone in on some things that people wouldn't be able to get, maybe plant that sort of seeded doubt in their head if they went with the other partner.
Hi. Okay. My name's Alana Elias Corvold, and I run a brand and creative studio at hsastore.com and fsastore.com. And I'm just really curious. These are incredibly impressive campaigns, and I just want to know what the teams look like that worked on all these things simultaneously in short periods of time.
Well, I'll start with Living Proof. I mean, that team, in the end, is probably 70 to 100 people, you know, all in. And the way we're structured, I have a pretty large in-house marketing team. We do some of our own creative in-house. We have an in-house agency. And then, of course, we're working with outside partners on both of these campaigns. So it's everyone from your digital folks to your strategic marketers to insights and research. I mean, it was just across the gamut for us. So it was, yeah, very large collaborative effort. The harder part was the folks outside of marketing, right? Like, I can imagine a lot of you, how do you get, you know, 2 commercials a day through legal, right? And so trying to get them to also change the way they worked, legal regulatory compliance, so that they were at the table with us so we could figure these things out. The other hard part, especially with Living Proof, was the doctors, right? So it's very hard to go in and be filming, you know, like we had twins just before a kidney transplant, their families are there. I mean, there's all kinds of complications. The families didn't both want to be on screen because there's been some divorce in the families. I mean, like, it's all these things we're trying to do in those moments, and it's like the doctor's got to do their work, and we have to be respectful of that and stay out of their way. And so there was actually a lot of effort from the clinicians to accommodate us and to allow us to get these things done. It was a little bit easier on the Blue Hen side. It was a smaller team. It was largely driven by partners in Napier. I think the hardest part there was actually finding a blue hen because there aren't a lot of them left.
Cindy, can you speak to the media plan for these and how that's evolved? How important, since you know, at least some of those seem to be leading with TV, how important is TV still in the larger media mix? I mean, for the Blue Hen, for the University of Delaware, you were targeting academics who were heavily wired. I mean, you were targeting my wife for that one, and I know that she's not watching TV anymore.
Well, even with Blue Hen, we weren't initially going to do TV. We started to create those simply for digital and for pre-roll, and then we liked them so much, we're like, well, all right, let's go buy some 15s and get them out there and really spread the word. So, so for that one, that was really
so they really were built for digital.
Yeah, and then in terms of like how it's changed us, well, so I've been at Highmark Health for 3 years. We weren't a terribly strategic team. We weren't doing a lot of 360-degree and sort of retail-focused marketing when I got there. So some of this really pushed us very fast into that world, and most of our campaigns now live in that world. We've used the tactic like the 30 and 30 a couple more times. So We just completed 365 days of featuring a different woman every day on digital. And we called that AHN Women. And honestly, that wasn't even so much just to keep the social vibe going. That was so I didn't want my team to forget about women and to keep it a priority throughout the year. So I thought, great, forcing a new story every day is going to really keep them on top of things. We ended up at the end on that one turning it into art. We turned it into an art exhibit featuring all 365 women and their quotes, and we took it to our gallery crawl, and it's now on display in our lobby of our company. We take it to the hospitals. Again, it's modular, it transports. But it's really touching. So everybody who sees it resonates. We also right now are doing a clinical excellence campaign where we chose to do 100 in 100 days. Now only 20 to 30 of those are going to end up being TV executions because machinery is not super exciting, so those were hard ones to do. But the idea that we're going to roll out 100 innovations in 100 days just to prove that we have advanced innovative care, not just high quality care. So we've used that tactic, and yeah, it's a strain overall on the media teams, but we've had really good collaboration and success with the different groups.
Good morning. I'm Frank Carter with Florida Hospital, and love your campaigns. I have a question with regards to the content and being able to sustain that content. You've introduced a new way of communicating. You're building new expectations of consumers on how often you're communicating. Yeah. How are you going to sustain that?
I know. Yeah, so like we did the 30 and 30. The next year we probably did about, I don't know, when it comes to TV, maybe 55 executions. You know, every year you're looking at your budgets and you're like, okay, well, you know, this isn't too worn out. How many more can we keep this up? You know, so it has. We have gotten ourselves into an interesting position. Now, we are not running out of content on the health system side. So the beauty of a health system and research and innovation and customer stories is there. I mean, it's honestly, as a marketer, it's easy. They're differentiated, it's beautiful, it's emotional, it's all the raw material you need. The hard part for us has been on the health insurance side. And we've struggled with the living proof format for Highmark, partially because part of the magic is that the format works when you feel like you're watching something happening. A lot of the stuff that happens in insurance happened 3 months ago, and so how do you turn that into a moment? So some of our most effective stuff was stuff happening in the moment, somebody having a pharmacist come to their house to review their medication, someone having a home infusion, having the nurse come to their house. And then recently we tried to tweak the format where we had basically our members, our patients, talking to the camera about their care managers and their health coaches, and it didn't work as well. And a part of it is regular people aren't beautiful people. And in this format, that was okay because you're just watching what's happening. But when you're supposed to be relating to them and they're talking to you, and someone's maybe very large or very old or very different than you, people didn't really relate. And so we couldn't get engagement when we tested the spots and like how people were watching and reacting emotionally. We couldn't get the engagement we wanted. So we're still, because you got to stay fresh, right? So like you can't just keep doing the same thing. So like we've evolved this 2 or 3 times now in 2 years, right? And so I don't know. We're kind of we're figuring it out as we go.
Figuring it out as we go. Cindy Donahoe, that was fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing that.